Well, first of all, I think there's and one of the things we need to think about is the difference between talking about projects and talking about project management. And if we're talking about undergraduates, a degree to which you talk about the very specific skills and techniques of project management, which might involve using things like Microsoft Project. It might involve things like identifying activities and the dependencies between activities and estimating the effort needed to carry out each of these activities, and then actually monitoring when the project starts that people are actually following the plan. So all those things to do with project management. However, there could be other things which affect the success or failure of a project beyond the simple project management. So there we might be looking at things like the context of a project, for example, the legal implications, the legal obligations that may relate to a particular project. For example, it may be that if you implement a project in a particular for a financial application, there may be financial regulations which you need to be aware of. And then there could be things like making sure that the project's software products will actually meet business needs. So that's the first kind of thing we may have to sort of discuss. The next one actually is the question of to what extent is IT project management just project management? Is there something special about IT and software project management which makes the techniques needed to run IT projects radically different from those needed to lead any other type of project? And we can talk about that have a useful discussion about that. There's also perhaps the issue of the difference between project management and leadership. And many writers and many trainers in the area distinguish between project management and leadership. So project management is very often seen as perhaps the more administrative side of project management, whereas leadership is to do with if you like, the relations between management and their staff, about getting the best out of your staff. And also leadership might actually relate to things like identifying technical solutions which are going to help the project be more successful. So what you've got here is perhaps the difference between technical leadership, where you've got people who will influence decisions made about the technical aspects of the project, and then you may have other people who perhaps are better at actually dealing with people. And in a way, what you want is perhaps to have leaders who can both grasp the technical issues, at least in outline, but can also communicate effectively with their own team members and also with the clients. The other thing perhaps we would want to talk about is the different. I've got here the role of the market versus national needs. So what we can do is that we can actually start from the viewpoint of what does industry need from their project managers? What topics, if you like, in their training should be covered? What skills should they acquire? The other approach might be to say, well, we're not going to actually worry too much about identifying skills. What we'll do is we'll actually look at the market and say, well, what is it when it comes, for example, to training courses? What is it that people want to have training in? And we'll be looking at what, if you are a trainer, or if you are a certification body with a range of qualifications, then what you will do is perhaps focus on those where there is most demand. Now that may, as you see, that's kind of maybe fine, but it may mean that some areas where there are deficits in terms of IT skills, they may be missed. But once again, I say this is a matter which is going to be subject to discussion. Okay, Finally, for this presentation, one of the things we look at is standards, focus on standards. Now, what is a standard? Well, a standard is something which in a way is independent of the educationists and employers. And what it is that a certification body or a standards body has hopefully talked to employers and to practitioners in a particular area, and they have documented what they think is best practice. Now that goes into a document, and an example of that would be Prince 2. And then what happens then is when it comes to training, rather than the people who do the training having to communicate with employers directly, they can say that they can regard the standard as representing the standards that employers have identified. So what happens is that rather than having to go to employers to find out what to teach, they can go to Prince 2, for example. Now, one of the questions about that will be, that sounds great, but the question will be, how effective are these standards in practice? Okay, so on that note, I'm going to stop